Stephen Feeney, welcome to Liverpool. Welcome to the studio. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I mean, as always, it's always a bit awkward because we've been standing over there having a chat for about 15 minutes. So I've been looking forward to this. I think people will be intrigued to see the person behind the comments. But first and foremost, you're an independent agile coach, veteran, and actor. But from an agile point of view, you've got a background in lean startup and Scrum, specifically focusing on building great teams that deliver valuable products. Is that fair? Because it's off your profile.
That is fair. That's true. Yeah. Although I should update that. I haven't changed that in years. I mean, it's still true today, but it's. I think that was my very first kind of LinkedIn summary.
Okay, fair enough. Well, it's obviously worked. I came across this post, so I'm going to read it out, and then it'd be cool to get your thoughts on it. There was a lot to choose from, but I went with this one. So, wouldn't it be novel for agilists to write a post saying that something failed because they were not very good, rather than blaming the spectre of faceless managers and bureaucracy? Nothing ever failed because they were not good at it. It's always the business didn't understand, or they refused to listen to my wonderful ideas that I got from a blog post somewhere. Every day we have to wade through the absolute trash that is agilists putting up comics and posts laughing at managers. Good grief. End scene. Where did that come from, mate?
It sounds a bit mild for me, actually. I stand by that. That's true, right? And I don't just stand by it. I also live by that as well. I had no idea you were going to pick that post up.
That's the beauty of it.
But one of the things I do in my spare time is I'm a guest lecturer for the University of London on the Masters in Entrepreneurship. And the reason that they get me back every year is I'm one of the only entrepreneurs that comes in and does this big talk on how I personally failed, right? And I talk about several businesses I tried to launch in the startup sphere. They all failed, and for different reasons. And I outline that. And I've also got a couple of posts on Stack Exchange, which were voted correct. I was quite junior in the time that I wrote them. They were very compelling, but they're wrong. And I've left them up there with an addendum at the end to say, if you're reading this in this time, this was written at a time in my career when I believed these things, but I was wrong. And more senior and more experienced individuals have given me guidance on how I was wrong. But I very rarely see that from other people in our industry. But what we do get, and it really, really does get on my nerves, is an extreme amount of laughing at other parts of the business. It's always this scornful tone. It's always this sarcastic idea. And I know people love Comic Agile and it gets shared a lot, but they're terrible for it. It's always taking a fairly complex subject, such as how do we buy marketing space a year in advance? And they distill it down to, oh, well, you know, they just don't understand Agile and we should laugh at them. And it's the sarcastic and laughing into the sleeve that I don't like from this industry, because most of the people have never tried to build a business. They've never tried to balance the competing aims of that business. Few of them have launched an actual product. And I think that comes through in some of the posts and some of the guidance and some of the keynote talks that we see is from people that have never really tried to live through these principles and these values in their own business.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think there should be a little bit more humbleness.
I like it. I mean, we'll that's just a nice opener. And I don't disagree. However, you have got quite an intriguing or interesting background. So if you could tell me, you were in the forces as an intelligence operator, which always sounds interesting and a bit like, oh, what was that about? And then obviously you worked. You tell me. This is about you.
So the intelligence operator thing always sounds cooler than it is in reality.
Okay.
I remember I had a friend called, I still do have a friend called Chris Kemp, who made this joke once. We were in Basra and he said, do you know what? Now I think about it, They didn't actually know what the job was going to be. It could have been, sweeping the streets for all I knew. But the minute they said secret and intelligence, I signed on the dotted line.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it's really just kind of data analysis. That's what it is. There's lots of different roles to it. There's operational intelligence and counterintelligence, and there's electronic warfare, and there's, working with various different types of technology. But it's generally just taking a bunch of data, analyzing it, and giving some advice and trying to influence a decision somewhere. But I think the thing that it gave me that I found to be a big strength was, particularly in the British Army, when you join the intelligence corps, you get given the rank of Lance Corporal straight out of training. Okay. So you're already you're one promotion up on some of your peers and some of the other cap badges and trades.
How come? That is news to me, so I'm interested.
So the reason for it is because you're providing guidance to officers and commanders that have to make decisions at a certain level, and you need a rank that's commensurate with the ability to provide guidance and be taken seriously incredibly. I believe that's the reason.
Makes sense.
It might also be a financial incentive, but I think the real reason is because you are going to be liaising with quite senior individuals who are going to be making decisions. Now, the thing that they teach you, which is very, very important, and it's separate to kind of how you become an intelligence operator, it's a separate training package, is that you have to get really comfortable with the sentence, I don't know. Because you're talking about courses of action that can affect men and women's lives. So while you're acting as an advisor to a Blue Forces commander, and you are there to advise them on, this is what we think an enemy course of action would be, you give them a range of options that just, knowing what I know about a potential enemy, this is what we would do in this situation, and this is how he would try and affect your forces. You get really comfortable with the sentence, I don't know, but you follow it up with, I'll find out for you before the end of the day.
Yeah.
And the people that adopted that got really comfortable with standing there, not knowing something and admitting it. And I always felt that was a big strength, that when I got to the corporate environment, it was super simple for me to bow out of things that I didn't have an expertise in. Just simply don't know. But if you need me to know, I'll go and find out for you. And the second thing that it taught me is that you are an influencer, you're not a decider. Mm-hmm. And I see this a lot in corporations, not necessarily in the agile space, but more in the peripheral services, such as user research, product management, anything that's kind of UCD element. What we see is a lot of people that want to own the customer experience rather than realizing that you are there to influence the product manager or whatever that product manager role proxy is. And that's where a lot of that unhealthy tension comes from, is I feel like my decision should be respected. You're not in the position to decide. You're there to influence. And I adopted that very early in my career, and I think it went very well for me.
And what attracted you to the army in the first place?
Well, that's a story. And that kind of delves into probably a little bit more about me. I'm quite an impulsive guy. I'm not very risk averse. I was at the University of Derby studying political science. And we were doing like a mock debate, and we had it all set up like we were in House of Parliament in Westminster. And I had been given the role of supporting the Iraq War. Now, just for a bit of fun, I'd been tracking kind of the advance of Blue Forces on a map using open source sources, and I'd taken like a strong interest in it. And it was on my wall at in Hall's residence, and people would come in and look at this map with these little blue pins and stuff on. And looking back now, it was very amateur stuff, right? But midway through the debate, as I'm representing the government support for the war in Iraq, one of the guys kind of broke character and said, well, if you believe so strongly, I think maybe I was winning the debate. And he said, well, if you believe so strongly in Iraq, how come you're not over there fighting? And I was like, you know what? That's a really good point. Just pushed my books across. My tutor was like, don't do this. I was like, nah, he's got a point, actually. Let's go see for ourselves. Just walked out of university, went into careers office. And they were like, what do you want to do? I said, I want to jump out of planes. And they went, nah, you're too tall. Where have you come from? I was like, I've just come from university. He went, we've got a job for you. So I went down to Chicksands, which is not too far from my house, about an hour and a half from my house in Bedford. Did the assessment for a couple of days. And they said, you've got the aptitude to do intelligence work. So passed that assessment, ended up in training.
And that was for 9 years.
Yeah.
From what I
Yeah, it was about 9 years, I think, 2005, maybe a little bit less than 9, actually, 2005, 2013. Yeah.
Yeah. Why did you leave? Or what would
I really only joined to go on tour, you know. I was a terrible soldier. I was a terrible soldier. I was a great marksman and I had some skills. I could do certain things, but regimental soldiering just wasn't for me. The sort of the discipline and all of the legacy that goes into it and all of the loyalty that goes into it, it just wasn't for me. The reason I liked intelligence work is you went everywhere as kind of either an individual or as a pair. Like I went on tour by myself, straight out of training pretty much, which I enjoyed. I don't think I would have done as well in my career if I had joined one of the other CAT badges, where there's a significant amount of kind of peer conformity. So yeah, I think once I'd been on tour and I'd been to Iraq and I went to Afghanistan, it really wasn't for me, and I felt that the creativity was quite stifled, which the West Point kind of academy had written some white papers about, saying that once people of a certain persuasion had done a number of deployments, they would come back and be dissatisfied with regimental soldiering.
I did not know that.
And I remember I went in front of my sort of chain of command when I'd sort of hit the clicks on JPA, and funnily enough, against the regs, I went on op Herrick in Afghanistan during my resettlement period. Okay. They were like, hey, would you be willing to do this? Because we've had an injury. And I was like, yeah, of course, absolutely. So I foregoed my resettlement period and went back on tour. But as I came back and sitting down for my final interview, they said, what would it take to make you stay? Because you've been promoted quite quickly here and you've got really good reports.
What rank were you at this point, just for context?
Corporal. But I'd been recommended for sergeant at like my 4 and my 5 year point. And then we moved into counterintelligence and it wasn't a good fit for me. But my career had been very, very good. And I had a couple of white papers published in like the British Army Review. And much like my Agile career, there was a couple of people that didn't like me. They were like, this guy's too outspoken. But there was a couple of people like, no, the things he says, they have value. So I sat down in front of chain of command and they were like, what would it do to keep you? And I said, look, I'll never complain about sleeping conditions. I'll sleep in any conditions. I'll eat any food. You'll never hear me complain about the food. I really don't mind where you send me in the world or what we do or how we live. I just want to do really interesting intelligence work. And they went, I've got nothing for you, sign the papers. So
what was the journey into the corporate space? Or did you go straight into the corporate space?
No, when I came out, I became a Palantir FSR. So Palantir, for those of you that sit at home that don't know, it started life as an anti-fraud tool for PayPal. Very quickly became a intelligence tool that was marketed and adopted by a number of special forces, a number of militaries, a number of police forces around the world. And they were looking for ex-intelligence operators to come on board. So through a UK company called IMSL, I became a Palantir FSR, went to America, did my training, and started sort of administering and using Palantir services and demonstrating them to potential clients. But I didn't fancy going back to Afghanistan for 6 months. You know, my son had just been born and I didn't fancy, going to New Zealand for a year. So I was like, you know what's not for me. But what I did love was everything about how the Palantir system had been built, which was a complete lean startup story of building it in, California, flying back and forth to In-Q-Tel, the sort of the investment arm of the CIA, working with them in Washington, D.C. and doing these demos every 2 weeks. The entire story of how it had been built was really, really interesting. And we got this crash course in continuous integration, continuous deployment, and everything that we hold dear today, but was kind of cutting edge in Silicon Valley at that point, And many companies hadn't really adopted some of these technologies. They weren't that popular at this point. So came back to the UK. I was like, well, what do I do now? And I really like the startup industry. So I entered Lean Startup London.
Yeah.
And I won it with 2 other guys. And it wasn't my idea that won it. I joined his idea. His name was Klaus Brauvenbauer. I think he's in New Zealand now. He had this idea for pairing gym buddies together with different gyms. So you're at Fitness First and I'm at Virgin, but we both want to max our bench. We know each other, we're friends. So we get reciprocal passes to each other's gyms so we can go along.
It feels like in a very early, didn't a dating site didn't Bumble try and do that?
Well,
I'm like,
I think you might
knowing like, just for Mrs. Hughes who may be watching, I missed the whole dating app scene, but I've seen it on an advert that sounds like an early.
I think you might be right, because the idea failed for 2 reasons. One, people thought it was a dating hook, which Klaus's idea was not. But the real reason it failed, and it's a lesson that I've learned, is that where your product relies on platforming a number of competitors together, it will always fail if one of those organizations believes their market position is through their superior offering.
Yeah.
And we had this with a sort of a second idea that I had, a pitch to AWS once, which was, I'll come on to it in a second, but just the idea that if Virgin believe that they can attract more gym goers through a superior market offering, they have absolutely no incentive whatsoever to share a platform that would allow their competitors to catch them.
Yeah.
So the idea kind of failed, but we won the competition. And what we got was a year's office space at the Innovation Warehouse in Farringdon.
Okay.
So now we have...
Right in the heart of...
Yeah. So now we have access to kind of this space, and we have a business idea that isn't going to work. So the 3 of us kind of go our separate ways.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, what do I do now? And I was kind of hanging around the space, and I was trying to start my own ideas. And another company called PandaPay were like, hey, we've seen you giving some advice to some of the other teams. Would you like to join us as not co-founder, but kind of employee number 1? Mm. It's like, yeah, let's do that. So we get into Startup Bootcamp in Copenhagen, and we go over there and we spend 3 months in Startup Bootcamp, and it's really good, great experience. I beg the lead dev, the founder, let me pitch, right? Let me pitch. You're not the best. And he's like, no, it's my idea, it's my money. I'm like, okay, I understand. It is your investment. We stand up in front of all the investors, and they pitch this idea after 3 months of development. And one of the investors turns around to him and says, look, do you have any proprietary intellectual property for your idea? He says, no, not really. Okay, well then how do I give you money? Because I can name 500 startups doing the same thing you're doing, and I can name 30 in Shoreditch alone. Why would I give you money? He didn't really have an answer. We crashed and burned, and that kind of failed. So I'm like, okay, that failed. I'm still trying to launch some of my own things. They're failing. And the money that, at this point, I have 3 children.
I was going to say, like, since I'm trying to, you've left the army.
Burn through all the savings.
Yeah, you've entered a competition and won it, which is great. But so
I was doing some private intelligence work on the side for a close protection team in Iraq, but it wasn't bringing in much, which thank God that was there. That was the lifeline of doing some private intelligence work, which was bringing in, I think, somewhere in the region of about £700 a month.
Okay.
Like that was it.
Yeah.
Enough to kind of cover rent. But we had absolutely nothing. And Lean Startup London, like, hey, we're running the competition again. Do you want to come back as a coach? I was like, yeah, okay, I'll come back as a coach. And I'm coaching a team and they win it. I'm like, okay, great. Okay, you won it. And they say, hey, do you want to join? I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll join. So again, I'm back to being kind of co-founder / employee number 1 with another company. And it was a great offering. It was an idea for splitting the bill.
Okay, yeah.
Right. And we run into the same problem, which is different EPOS systems are like, we're not giving you access to our API. Why would we allow other EPOS systems to have like a shared infrastructure with us? So no, and also we can't be sure that you won't eventually go on to try and sell your own EPOS system. So we can get access to the APIs, and gradually the idea begins to die, despite great user research. So that fails, but we get into Microsoft Ventures, another accelerator. We go through this. And some of the people that were in Microsoft Ventures that made friends with have gone on to do like really great exits with really great products. the wife says, look, we're out of money completely. Get a real job. And I'm like, okay. Took a shot. It didn't work. And I get a job as, like most people that leave the forces, Prince 2 project manager.
Yeah.
Back in my hometown for a company called RS Components that sell every electrical component you can imagine. But primarily the one that most people know them for is selling Raspberry Pi.
Okay. Yeah.
And I get a job, not as a project manager, as a project management assistant on, like, I think at the time, it's like 18,000 a year.
And truthfully, how did that feel?
Quite well, because as a dad and as a husband, I'm earning and providing, and the family's stable, and I'm getting to go home every day instead of being in London, because it's only like 20 minutes from my house, like door to door. So I'm like, this is great. But I start reforming some of their processes. I'm like, look, some of these processes aren't that great. They're not that efficient. And what happens is, about 10 weeks into the job, they say, hey, we're going to transition to agility. Does anyone know anything about Agile, Scrum, or Lean Startup? And I'm like, I've got a bunch of awards. Like, I've given keynote talks at like IP Expo in London and various others. Like, okay, you're the guy. Come and coach our head of IT, a guy called Darryl Radley. And I was like, okay, I will do. And every day I'd meet with him for a couple of hours and I'd coach him so how he can transition his department to be more agile. And they're like, okay, great. We'd like you to be our first Scrum Master, but we're not going to give you that title. We're going to give you the title we're going to give you the title of planning manager, but we'll double your salary. Nice. So now you're on 40K a year and we'll give you a company car. And I'm like, okay, fantastic. It's great. So I'm like, okay, this is my career now. This is what I do. I'm a corporate guy. Gradually my soul's beginning to die a little bit because I took my shot and it missed. But as building a team, we had a great team and it went very well. And it must have been about 8-9 months later, I started thinking to myself, look, this company really don't know what they're doing at all. Like, all of their advice has come from me as an individual. They've got no real way of validating it. It's all good advice. We're building a great product. There must be other companies out there that don't know how to implement the lessons from either Japanese supply chain management or Silicon Valley. They must be struggling. So I start, okay, well, how would we go about, moving into this space? And Aviva were the first client that were looking for a contractor to come in and give them some advice. And I said, okay. And I remember at the time, it was summer holidays, they were hiring. I had the children and they said, hey, we're willing to do an interview this Saturday. Can you come down on Saturday? And I said, yeah. And I brought like a portfolio of techniques for doing planning and delivery, which I knew they wouldn't have exposure to. And a friend called Abby was like, I'll watch the kids. Because I can't remember, I think the wife might have been away on business doing something. She works in fashion. But I didn't have anyone to look after my children.
Did she dress you today?
Say again?
Did she dress you today?
No. This is as fashionable as it gets. I'm normally in.
I like it, man.
I'm normally in like a hoodie and tracksuit bottoms. It takes a lot to get me out of tracky bottoms. But a friend called Abby was like, I'll look after the kids. Drove down the Saturday, presented my ideas, things like red routing and various other techniques they hadn't seen. They were like, great, you're hired. Come along. And I became a contractor. And
a quick burst on company's house to set something up.
Yeah, it was very much like that. Let's get like a cash plus business account, which. And then it was outside IR35. And at this point, start liaising with other people. I got invited to Poland to talk about potentially merging my company with another company because it'd been a good experience and they liked some of the training. And I'd never really been out of work
your
since.
Contract company, sorry.
There was a couple of other contractors there that had their own company and they were like, hey, let's merge. But never really been out of work since. And I think one of the things I was saying to you just outside is the interesting thing is that all of the contracts that I've ever had, most of them have been referrals from developers who get to an organization, start working, and then they say, if you need someone to do delivery or agile coaching, call this guy. Like this is the guy. As a developer, this is the guy I want. And that's kind of where most of my referrals have come from.
What do you think the reason for that is? Like, why do you think developers go, he's the person? Because I don't know if it's rare, but it's probably not the most common way of that happens.
I think it's because I've got a couple of maxims that I try and live up to. One of which is that if you're not managing the technical pipeline, if you're not managing the code pipeline, then everything else about you is managing the relationship pipeline. And if you can't do that, then you're no good to the devs. And I think it also comes from that exposure to that kind of Silicon Valley environment of the engineer is king, which is I'd sit down with the engineers and be like, look, I'm not technical enough. I've done some dev work, but I'm rubbish at it. But I will give you an environment where you can do your best work. Just trust me. And they're like, great, I'm on board. Brilliant. And they see me quite publicly correcting even senior executives and ensuring that they build the best possible working process for people to do knowledge work. And I think seeing that visibly, it gets a lot of credibility.
Yeah. You're not afraid of sharing an opinion?
No.
Where do you think that comes from? I think you've alluded to it slightly, but where do you think, what drives that?
I think being an only child, never really been one for suffering from like peer pressure or conformity, and maybe spills over a little bit into leaning into that persona as well. But my persona on LinkedIn, that kind of just emerged organically, you know. It wasn't like an intent. I didn't go out to like brand myself as like the contrarian agile coach or anything. But what the guys at work started calling me was the agile coach who hates agile coaches. And the interesting thing is, I really find about it is I never called myself an agile coach. It was just a job title that HR gave to me, right? Yeah. And even when I went to work for Department of Work and Pensions, they gave me the title senior agile coach. And people mid-argument would always use it as scornful. They'd always be like, oh, look at this guy calling himself senior agile coach. I'm like, no, just the title someone gave me. I'm just a guy that tries to help companies get value into production a little bit quicker than what they were before I got there. That's it. And if that's the title, agile coach, then that's what it is. But yeah, it's I never purposely went out of my way to be contrarian. And there are a couple of times when I've had to sort of be very humble and take the humiliation that comes with it sometimes when I've been wrong.
I was going to say, have you ever gone too far, do you think? I'm not asking for specific examples.
No, I don't think
have you ever sat there and gone, oh.
I don't think I've gone too far. I think I've never said anything to anybody that I wouldn't have said to them face to face. I think a few people have said things online that they wouldn't say face to face. I think I would. But the thing that probably... So, all right, great example is, right, I used to write on Medium, and a friend sent me the job advert for, long before I ever worked there, Department of Work and Pensions Agile Delivery Manager, right? And I absolutely savaged this job advert with all of the confidence of someone that didn't work there, right? I tore it to shreds. And it was called, the blog post was called Agile Delivery Manager, No Such Job, right? And I utterly shredded this job advert.
Still sounds like you made it with yourself.
Right. So then a couple of years later, I got invited to apply for the senior agile coach job at Universal Credit. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, great. So I go along, get the job, and it was a really kind of intense process to get the role. And it wasn't just me, it was another guy called Anil Kulkarni, another great coach who got the role. And we're obviously part of DWP. And I get invited to the DWP Agile gatherings, of which sometimes would be over 100 people. And I go along to one of them, and I meet the head of practice for digital delivery and the head of practice for agile coaching, the head of practice for digital project managers. And they're like, oh, we know who you are. You wrote the blog post that savaged our job advert. And they took it in such good humor. They were like, you weren't right about everything, but you're right about some things. So I got invited to work with HR to rewrite a job advert that'd be more applicable, right? Now, all this still sounds, oh, Steve, you're bigging yourself up, right? COVID hits. And also at the same time, Universal Credit says, along with DWP, everyone's moving inside IR35. And I'm like, that's okay, I'll move inside. It's COVID, I'll take the job.
Yeah.
Right, so sign here for your inside IR35 agile coaching job. Whoa, no. I'm not going to sign a contract that says I'm now inside doing the same job. I'm going to need a new job title. And they went, well, the only other job title we've got for you is Agile Delivery Manager. I'm like, okay, I'll sign it. And they went, and with that, we would like you to take on 2 teams and run them as an Agile Delivery Manager.
Yeah.
So I did. I took on 2 teams. I go back to the next community practice, and they're like, well, look who's an Agile Delivery Manager. I was like, all right, let's hear it.
Yeah.
And sort of, it was, again, it was all very good natured, and they took it in the spirit it was intended. So I don't think I went too far, but I'm more than willing to eat that humble pie when it comes.
Hello folks, sorry to interrupt this video, but if you have got this far, it would really help if you did subscribe to the channel. Because it's face to face, it makes convincing people a lot easier to travel up all the way to Liverpool to record in this lovely studio. So, like I said, please subscribe and thanks for watching. Do you enjoy the back and forth online?
I do sometimes, but I've got much more respect for people that, and when I coach Scrum Masters or coach project managers or anybody else, product managers, I tell them like, look, we all don't need to agree, but you need to know what you agree with. That's the important thing. You cannot just flip-flop when you read a new blog post or you've got a new book, you've read something by Simon Sinek, and you're like, oh, hey, I've just changed how I feel. It can't work like that. You have to go firm on your own first principles. If I know what they are, even if I don't agree with them, well, at least I respect you and I know what we're going to work with and I know the consistency I would get from you. And I don't think we have enough consistency from people in that they're more than willing, that their viewpoint is often defined by attacking a framework or an idea rather than what they believe will deliver the best possible value. I mean, does that make sense? Yeah. And I think that's what they do. They define themselves by what is going wrong with everything else rather than what is going right. And I think that's why we don't see enough positive case studies coming out of the industry.
Do you find the community can be quite patronizing to devs? I see that as a theme in some of the interactions you have in terms of, I think you're obviously being sarcastic in terms of, we've all got to protect the devs. But I think correct me if I'm wrong, you seem to be more like just treat them as they don't need.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things. I think the community itself is far more patronizing to just the idea of management as a function.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And for me, that comes from not understanding that a significant number of the practices that we would have in a startup or even a scale up do not scale to an established market leading company.
Yeah.
I also feel as well that we often can be very deferential to devs. The code is not the thing. The code is just a thing that gets us to a thing. The same as Agile is not the thing. It's just a thing that will get us to the thing. If we could have a low or a no code solution, we probably would. But we consistently have to tailor all of our environments to not just devs, but a particular type of dev. And those are often the most vocal online. And that's where that comes from. I think that we, as an industry, it's often the same group of people in our industry having the same arguments over and over. And it's almost like we're kind of just arguing amongst ourselves for no reason. So I'd say in the last year, I've kind of bowed out a bit more than what I used to. I was very, very active and I don't so much anymore.
No. Something must really have to pique your interest for you to get involved.
Yeah. What I find also really interesting about this whole thing is
it's great to watch, by the way. It's brilliant.
I've developed my own sort of maxims that I've brought to organizations, and they've landed quite well, I think, with executives, senior managers, and even some teams.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there. And
Sure.
I think like you don't, well, from what we've discussed, and you're never out of work.
No.
So it's sort of proof in the pudding, really, isn't it? In my opinion.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I've I've also made like some clumsy agile coaching mistakes, which I think have cost me work as well. And I'll share those in a second. But one of the maxims that I've kind of brought is that your micro evidences your macro, right? And I use this quite a bit, which is that practices evidence the principles. And yet we consistently see it online. People go, the practices aren't the thing. They really are. The principles are the thing. Principles without the practice mean nothing. If you were to say to me, Steve, what principles do you hold? And I say, well, hard work, Jack. And you go, okay, well, how do you evidence that? Well, it's the principle. Yeah. Like, no, what is your practices, the evidence that you treat your principle truly? And we have a consistent default in our community of saying that practices don't matter. They really do. They really do. And if you were to go through a book that's kind of highly respected, such as like the XP White Book, you're going to find the word practice twice as much as you're going to find the word principle. And there's a reason for it, because you need the practices. And that's kind of one of the examples where I think that a lot of the arguments in the industry, they're just very esoteric and it gets on my nerves. And also the other maxim is that I don't think enough people in our industry have enough sense of the history and the etymology of where some of the practices, some of the ideas came from. And a really good example of this was a few weeks ago, a product manager should put up a post saying, I've come up with a system whereby my story points equal time, right? And you can imagine the industry's response, story points don't equal time, they equal complexity. And they start going nuts and they start kind of brigading and blah, blah, and you don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, do you know what? Let's weigh in here. Let's weigh in.
Put your wellies on,
right?
Obviously.
It's like, just because we're at the point of bullying now. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but something along the lines of like, you're all a bunch of idiots. And the reason you're a bunch of idiots is because story points did originally equal time.
I had this same debate this week.
About Ron Jeffries' original post saying that they were a multiplier of time. They would take a story point that would multiply by 3 and it would be because it would be this many days. And
so I had the exact same debate. And I was like, I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm just giving you this is fact. It's history. Like, it's not my opinion. And this individual was like pulling a face. And I was like, well, I'm not this isn't an argument. This is me just telling you this is where they came from.
Yeah.
You can't really argue with that. But anyway, you just triggered a thought.
We had exactly the same thing. And it was mainly because I think people have adopted a bunch of ideas, but they've never really investigated where it came from. And I do have kind of big disagreements with some thought leaders in the area, including some signatories of the Agile Manifesto. I'll regularly kind of argue with Alistair Cockburn. But the one thing they're very good at is they bring receipts.
Yeah.
And they'll say like, well, this is the original thinking behind why we did this. And this is the original, and here is the original posts from the Usenet, where we would go off and debate these ideas. And I really like that. And I think that's important, and not enough people in our industry do that.
You alluded to agile coaching mistakes. What were they?
Oh, yeah. So, there's many business mistakes. Some agile coaching mistakes. The big business mistake was working for a client, and I had this kind of thing that I could turn around a non-performing for each team within 3 months.
Okay, yeah.
And I'd done it twice, and I had a whole data-driven case study to show how I did it. This client were like, hey, do you want to come work for us? And I said, this is what I do. And they went, great, let's do that. Sure enough, I do it again. Take a really unperformant, feature team, get them to be delivering value on a regular basis with, at the time, because they worked in Scrum, fantastic burn down charts that would, they still were a little bit bumpy, but they were getting to near zero every sprint. And they were like, great, and this is awesome.
You do know someone's going to now go burn the burn down chart.
I know, right?
Throw it in the bin.
But this is how they were going from a complete Prince 2 waterfall project management style scenario. So getting them to hey, we're going to plan every couple of weeks and we're going to deliver value into production every couple of weeks and we're going to work with customers nearly every day and customers will see the evidence of what they want within a couple of weeks. It was big for them.
Yeah, massive.
So we get to the end of 3 months and I'm like, hey, this team are working great. And they went, okay, brilliant. What do you want to do? And I said, do you know what? And this is naivety. I said, you don't really need me. The team are working great. Why don't you take the budget you use for me, hire an extra dev? And they went, that's a good idea. I said, you write me a great reference. I've got other clients I can go to. And I was off to Santander at this point. I said, write me a great reference. And, you know, in like 3 to 4 months, we're giving you a really good kind of agile experience. I went, yeah, well, let's do that. So, okay. Anyway, I phoned up one of the Prince 2 project managers about a month later and I said, hey, did you get another dev? They went, no, Steve, they just hired another agile coach.
Brilliant.
I was like, but what are they doing every day? They went, we don't know. Because we've already got, there's probably some other things they could do, but it was my naivety that I didn't go and walk the halls McKinsey style and find somewhere else to offer support to. So that was one of my big mistakes. And I think the other one was as well, with another client, I never fully appreciated just how invested they were in Scrum. So when I started advocating Kanban for certain teams, it was a direct business attack on their vision for the department.
Okay.
And they basically shuffled me out of the department to be like, you're not the right guy. But luckily another department were like, hey, if Steve's available, we're bringing him in with us. But I just didn't have the business experience to realize that this department head was fully invested in Scrum and they were not willing to explore additional kind of frameworks.
Yeah, fair enough. When you go into an organization, what gives you what are the red flags? 1 or 2 red flags. You go, oh, this isn't exactly what they spoke about, or I'm going to be pedaling against the stream.
Do you know, I'm not sure. Can't really say that I've ever got to an organization and they weren't transparent about the challenges they were facing.
Yeah.
I don't think that's ever been true. Most of them have been very upfront. That's why you're being hired.
Yeah.
There's some patterns that we can see where we're like, okay, it's going to be a bit of a challenge here. Some of them are fairly unique to different organizations. I think, like for instance, in a particular organization, one of the big challenges was that financial accountancy drove the delivery structure. So everything was segmented into a cost. That cost had to have a value at the end. It needed to be measured. It was done on a project portfolio program kind of PPM style system. And it's like, okay, well, our true stakeholder here for things like innovation accounting and value stream mapping is not really the delivery managers or even the teams. It's going to be the accountancy department. So there are, I think, sometimes bigger challenges within the organization that the ability to unlock the team's skills to deliver value on a repeatable basis, that really comes from changing other parts of the organization to allow them people to do that. It doesn't necessarily sit with the team.
Cool. We're going to pivot. We're going to shift because I'm really intrigued.
Sure.
Outside the agile bubble, you've been sharing it on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah.
You've been like the thespian, the actor, Stephen Feeney. Where's that? Where did it come from? What's the journey? What's the plan? Is it like? I mean, you've got a headline. It's been going pretty well from what I've seen.
It's gone okay.
I think you're being modest there, personally.
It's gone all right. So where it came from, I'd always wanted to act, and I just never done it. And actually, when I was leaving the forces, I had considered going to drama school, and I'd been accepted. Like before I went to University of Derby, I'd been accepted to Mountain View, and I didn't go. And I was like, maybe it's just not for me. So then got 3 children, Darcy, Holly, and Jacob. I love them, and they're all very unique, and they're all forging their own path in life. Darcy, the eldest, was acting, right? And she was on stage in London at a big theatre, very proud. But then she started to be a little bit non-committal, right? And I'm trying to tell a teenager, like, look, the only way this happens is if you do the thing. You got to go and do the thing. Don't worry about the risks, just do the thing. And that's true of everything in life, you know? Like my youngest, Jacob, I want to be a footballer, then you got to go and play football. Like this, you need to commit to it. And she's like, and she's come back with that kind of classic teenager retort, which is, oh yeah, you didn't do the thing. And I'm like, okay, well, I will. How hard can it be? Yeah. So I started applying some agile thinking to this, which is, what is the lowest possible investment I can make to validate whether A, I enjoy acting, or B, have any raw talent that could be shaped and instructed by a director. And I started looking around for community theatres near sort of where I live. And there was Leicester, which have the Little Theatre, which is little in its name only. It's 350 seats, historic. Richard Attenborough, like, famously performed there as his first ever performance. And there's Market Harbour, which is a slightly smaller theatre, but very well equipped. And they had audition notices out for two roles. So I go along to the auditions, get both lead roles.
With no practice apart from in front of the mirror?
No, just went along. I was like, let's see how it goes, right? So I go along and...
what did you have to do?
So the one for the Little Theatre was a play called Bouncers by John Godber.
I saw the poster.
And it was the way it would normally work at the audition is they would say, right, we're going to go through some scenes, and we're going to get you to read characters. We might get you to switch it up, read a different character, because ultimately, whilst it's community theatre, they're looking to put on a great show, but they might have a slightly different vision for you, and they've got more freedom than maybe a casting director that's casting professionally. So you read some lines, and they might ask some people to go, some people to stay, and then they might also ask people to come back again, read again. And the auditions would normally take place over 2 or 3 nights. Yeah. So I go along to both auditions, and I get both lead roles. Right. Again, this takes like a kind of funny turn. So I choose the one at Leicester. It's a bigger theatre. The director had more experience, Jane Towers, and she was like a really accomplished actress in her own right. Anyway, we're midway through rehearsals, and she says, "Steve, can you go downstage, right?" And I'm like, "What?" And she went, "Steve, have you ever been on stage before?" I was like, "No." She was like, "Holy fuck." She's like, "Oh my, have you ever acted before?" I was like, "No." Yeah. And she was like, "How do you even know you're going to be able to go out on stage in front of everybody? How do you know you won't get stage fright?" It's like, "Jane, we're all going to see something on the night." Yeah. And I remember standing backstage for that first play, and that was only last year. That was June 2023.
And what was that one called? Sorry,
that was Bouncers.
That was just yeah.
And we're standing backstage, and I was standing in front of the doors, ready to go on. And my 3 co-stars were quite nervous. They'd been acting a very long time. They were very talented guys. One of them had his own theatre company, but they were quite nervous. And I remember standing there, like, I have no trace of nerves whatsoever. I was like, this is where I should be. This is just it for me.
Calm.
Like, yeah, it's just like, I absolutely love where I'm standing right now. I want to do this for a living. So we've done this agile idea. I've invested nothing other than time at this point. And again, this kind of lean startup-y idea. John Godber is like the 3rd most performed playwright in the UK. And I said to the cast and crew, "I'm going to get John Godber to come down and watch Bouncers." And they went, "This guy's never going to come down and watch an amateur production of Bouncers. That's ridiculous." Like, of course.
And was that show someone had written it? It wasn't like a...
So this is his play.
His play. Right.
This is his play. And the way it works is that as a playwright, when you write a play in the UK or in any country, but when you write a play, you can make that play available for amateur groups to perform, and they will just pay a small license fee and buy the scripts.
Got it. Okay.
But you must get permission. Yeah. Because as the playwright, your own theatre company may be putting it on as a tour. So message John Godber, say, "Hey, we're amateurs, we're putting on a Little Theatre, come and watch." And I get a response back saying, "I can't make it. But the lead actor, Fraser Hamill, is going to come down and watch you." So Fraser Hamill shows up, who was in Justice League and a bunch of other shows. and he's sitting in the audience, and he had played the lead role on the UK tour. And at this point, the director Jane and a bunch of the cast are like, "Wow, you really just do it, don't you?" I was like, "You got nothing to lose. Do the thing." So meet Fraser Hamill in the bar afterwards, and he's like, "That was good. You should get some training." He was like, "You've got some talent there, you know, but you need training." I'm like, "Okay, let's get some training." So I applied to drama school, organize it with the client. I could take every Friday off, go to drama school in London. And again, I do more shows. But whilst we're there, everyone's talking about how at the end of the year at drama school, there'd be a showcase and you would get an agent. I was like, I'm not waiting until then. So I produce a bunch of business development templates, automated it through Streak, through Gmail, which is, they've removed the free tier now, which is rubbish. But I automated the whole thing through Streak, had a customer management database, went out to absolutely every agent and every casting director and just kept badgering them, come and see me in these shows. And eventually an agent went, "Actually, Steve, would like to bring you on board." And that agent has been sending me kind of casting notices ever since. So I got my agent before we even finished drama school. And then finished drama school. And I noticed everyone's going back to their jobs. Like, you know, they're going back to being baristas, marketing managers, whatever.
So it was every Friday with homework in between. Like that
was, as well as doing sort of shows for other theatres.
Yeah.
But then we get to the end of the year. It's very emotional. And we have a big award ceremony. And it's like, you're now in the industry. You're trained. Go forth and act.
Yeah.
And no one's really doing anything. And I was like, this is rubbish. We've got to maintain momentum here. And a notice comes out from Etc. Theatre in Camden saying, end of the month, we've got slots available. Does anyone have a theatre show they want to put on? And I'm like, yeah, I'll buy the slots. I'll take all 4. Right? And they're like, great, what play are you putting on? I don't know yet. I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean you don't know?
Yeah.
Said,
is this the one? Because I think you were doing it last month.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't know yet. I'll figure that out later. And they're like, that's nuts, mate. And like, you're gonna have to stand in front of people and charge them money for a ticket, and you don't have a show. It's like, I'll figure it out. Yeah. So we start the marketing process, and I take an idea that I'd had at drama school for a play about Renfield from Dracula, whereby I'm more true to the novel than any of the other adaptations, which make him quite weak. Renfield's a big, powerful guy in the novel. I'm like, I'm going to write this. And someone's like, you can't write a play in a month. Of course you can. So just do the thing. So write it out. One of the other actresses from drama school, Beth Baker, who's a wonderful actress, she was like, I believe in you. Like, can we collaborate on this? Can we do something? It's like, yeah. So we ended up both in it, and it went very well. It was a great experience. Lost money on it, but it maintained that momentum. And the interesting thing is, off the back of it, got invited to bring the show to Derby as part of their Dracula festival.
Oh, okay.
Take it to Derby and put it on for a bigger audience, rewrite it. Got some great reviews. And that was the first experience. But the drama school teacher and the founder of the drama school, Stephen Sobel, was like, kind of knew you'd be the first one to just
do it.
You know, to go off and do it, because you just don't really have a fear of failure. I was like, no, I don't. And I don't have a fear of brand damage either. I'm like, you can always recover from brand damage. Mm-hmm. You know, Groupon's first ever service was a coupon that they sent out via email. You can recover from brand damage. You need the feedback.
So where's that going? Like, what's the plan with that?
It's the dream. It's what I'd like to do. I'd love to work in the performing arts industry full time, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my children's futures by throwing myself at it full time. Mm. I think there'd be an element of selfishness if I did.
Yeah,
I want to give them the best possible chance to excel, and that comes from enrichment activities and holidays and all those things that you get from, from me having a good career. If I was going to throw myself at the acting career, I should have done it before I had children. I didn't, so I don't want to sacrifice, the standard of life and all the opportunities you want to give them right now.
It might just take longer. Doesn't mean it's impossible. Does it?
Well, that's the thing. But I think the benefit from it is that I've got all this experience that I see some of my peers on the course didn't necessarily have, and they were asking for. Like, they would be like, oh, I could see that their ability to market themselves, their ability to sell themselves, they just didn't have that experience.
Not many people will be able to relate to. Well, some people might, but what I think you're describing, if you think back to your basic training in the army, to loop it all the way back to the beginning, the people who were 25, 26, 27, up to 30, and you'd have some people who were in their 30s, they seem to do so much better and crack on so much more because they just had that confidence, that life experience, and that sort of ease of, this is a game. Well, you need to be able to, like, just, and where people like me, I don't know how old you were when you joined, like 17, 18, 19, you're still, you don't know literally your arse from your elbow, and you're like, you know.
Well, I was that guy that was in his early 20s when I joined, and I was working. So during basic, some people know this, some people won't, but during basic training, when you're at depot, you'll at the 6-week mark, you get let out of camp. I don't know if it was the same in Navy training. Did you guys get that?
Towards the end. You had one meal out before.
So you're there for 12, 13 weeks. At the 6-week point, you have earned the right to be responsible to go downtown. And for us, it was Winchester. Yeah. And everyone was looking forward to the 6-week point where you'd finally get to go downtown. You're allowed off camp. You get to have a beer, watch the football. It's Saturday. But around about 5.5 weeks, we got a brand new CEO for the camp. And new Sergeant Major arrived as well. And they were like, 6-week pass is revoked, right? You're all going to be cleaning. And we had to remove all the moss from the crazy paving all the way across camp, which was those sort of red diagonal bricks that are in fashion. And we didn't have enough things to remove them from, so they went and got us cutlery from the cookhouse, right? And we're on our hands and knees, everyone's scraping moss out. And I couldn't help it. I just burst out laughing, right? And my mate, Scott Jones, was like, what on earth are you laughing at? And I was like, I'm in my mid-20s, on my hands and knees. I'm scraping moss out of crazy paper. Someone's paying me for this, right? And he went, it's not funny. I was like, it's hilarious. And the PTI came over and was like, do you find something funny? And I was like, yeah, this is hilarious. And we're like, well, see if you find this funny. And we got marched up and doubled away and had to go off and do a run with the PTI. Like, I'll teach you to laugh at this. I was like, but at the time, like you say, the sentence you used just triggered it, which is, it was just a game. Yeah. And if you'd worked in other places, like if you'd lifted boxes for a living or you'd done other sort of menial tasks, you're like, this is not the hardest thing that we can do to earn money. This is easy. Yeah.
But I think that probably served you well in that drama environment, because you've got it's just time done, isn't it, in life? You're just a bit more settled. Where can people reach out? What's next? If you want them to reach out, where's the best place to say hello?
People can reach out. Contact me on LinkedIn. My website and stuff has all been refactored to be acting focused. I don't really have anything out there putting me out as an agile coach. I don't have any products that I'm really selling. I'm not doing any training courses. I'm just kind of working with that's why I label myself as an independent agile coach. I'm just kind of working with one client right now, which is Financial Times. I did used to have Financial Times in the headline. I've removed it because when conversations get heated, I've seen people try to tag in the Financial Times, and before that, Department of Work and Pensions, to say, oh, do you support this guy's views? And it's like, well, they're hiring me to coach them. I'm not representing views of them. And so I've removed that. So, but no, I just work with one client at a time. I haven't really ever attempted to scale my offering beyond that. I've thought about it. I've considered it. And it's been great to watch kind of your journey and see that scaling into a real consultancy with clients and career paths and branding. It's been a joy to watch.
No, I appreciate that, mate.